questions. Here's our recording. And then hopefully some time just to do a quick wrap up. And I do want to acknowledge the sponsors for this symposium that are in the program. And I will begin by introducing Allison Higinbotham, who has taught for 16 years high school mathematics at St. Michael's University School. And Allison will share with us some of her experiences with teaching Foundations of Mathematics 12 and how this course has been significantly transformed, which includes projects related to ecotourism and traditional root gardens. So we'll start with Allison, then later I'll introduce Rob. So take it away, Allison.
Thank you. Just give me a sec to share my screen. And hopefully that all works. All right, everyone can see okay?
Yes.
Good. All right. Hi, everyone. Ali Higinbotham. I'm so grateful to be here today and teaching from the traditional lands of the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples, now known as Greater Victoria. And I'm going to take you on a little bit of my family adventure, which is my endearing term for my Foundations of Math 12 students. They groan when I call them my family, but I think they secretly love it. I, like many, I think, high school math teachers have struggled to find authentic ways to kind of shift math education to align better with some Indigenous pedagogies and worldviews and not make it tokenistic. So actually looking for tangible ways. This journey kind of took me to Masters of Indigenous Education through UBC, which I'll be finishing up this summer. But where this particular project was born was in one of my courses with Dr. Joaquin Nunes, where it was an open inquiry, just like research what you want to research, find something that works for you and your practice. And so I did a lot of research and I kept coming across a lot of elementary and middle school math stuff. And finally, just, you know, how you have your best ideas in the shower. I had my shower thought, which was looking at my Foundations of Math 12 content, but through the lens of a student created fictional ecotourism business. While I was doing this in my course, it did allow me to get feedback from my professor as well as my peers and incorporate some of what they were, some of their suggestions as well. So I was able to begin implementing it just this past September. The way our school schedule is run is we have fixed terms, but we see classes either on the evens or the odds. So I kind of designed it knowing I have 3 distinct little sections of this course. And I've split them into financial literacy and geometric art and counting methods and probability. And the majority of the ecotourism model was kind of completed in those 2 terms. I'm currently under the term 3 graphs and regressions, where we're looking at Quetzal or Camas and root gardens. I'm not sure I'll have time to really get into that today because it is like a pretty significant project and part of what I'm working on for my capstone project. So when I introduced this project at the beginning of the year, we had about 6 weeks in our first term to kind of establish it. And so I just introduced it to the students, kind of trusted that it'd fly. It was a lot of trust in not knowing where things were going, which was an uncomfortable position to be in, but I just kind of leaned into it. So I had the students research current ecotourism businesses that was in an area that they connected with. It wasn't all local. I had some boarding students from Vietnam, and she decided to look at something back in Vietnam. I had students look at other places all over the world, as well as here in Greater Victoria. And they had to, you know, start to budget startup costs, what they might predict as ongoing expenses, research housing markets, and deciding if they wanted to, rent or buy a place to house their business. And so kind of really getting through that financial literacy component portion of the course, I used to have them look at mortgaging different houses, but instead of doing the project I'd always done, had shifted it to align with their little businesses. I also had them looking at, and when they were looking at businesses and also credit cards later, if it was out of Canada, having to actually research conversions, what would the cost difference be? And then in the final weeks, I was able to collaborate with our art department and our Indigenous scholar in residence, Dylan Thomas, a little bit. And when we got to geometric art, we worked on Inkscape to have the students create a logo that would include a fractal or a tessellation and had to kind of connect with their business model. And then they presented it back for peer feedback. So that was a full-on first term. You could tell, beginning of the year, tons of energy, making lots of changes, and really authentic connections to kind of make it student-centered and hit their interests and their personal connections with the land. When we got into term 2, they'd had a big break, like a 2-month break, and so we'd lost a little bit of momentum with the project. So I had to pivot, as we do, and instead of going and on a whole new tangent, what I had them do is write their own counting questions, so permutations, combinations, pathways, all grounded in their particular business. So a student that was looking at horseback riding through Wyoming, she might look at how many different pathways can you get from the barn to the lake or something like that. And so they were working on specific questions. So they had to write their own questions and then solve them. And I think that it really allowed me to see what the students understood about the counting methods themselves if they were able to write a question. I did warn them about generative AI and said, you can put it in there, but sometimes it solves it wrong, sometimes it solves it right, sometimes it makes the question way too difficult. So we had that conversation as they were looking at it. And then for probability, I grouped the students based on their similar business models. So I had a few that were doing horseback riding, a number doing hiking and things like that, and adapted a board game that I had purchased off Teachers Pay Teachers. It was called the Board Game Probability Project by Mr. Hughes, and took what he had and adjusted it to kind of work with what we were doing in our class with the ecotourism business.
Their favorite part from the story and then wrote about what the story taught.
Maria, I think you might have your mic on there. So this was a really interesting way, again, to kind of see what the students could do, not only just with their board games, but also having to then look at the probability. They had parameters like what certain colors, and it might be what is the probability if you roll this, a 6 that you're going to land on a red or a blue, or something less than 6 you're going to land on red or blue. And so they had to work within those. So some of the things I really noticed was student engagement. This is generally not a course where students love math, and they don't feel successful in math, and that's why they've, at my school anyways, why they've selected the Foundations of Math 12 course. But I really found that through the engagement and through this project, they were really proud and really happy to share the learning that they had done and the connections they were making. I had, my student that was working on the Vietnam tour, she was so excited to tell me she'd spoken with her mom, and they'd kind of co-collaborated and co-designed the route that they would take. Other students were polling family and friends for names, and I could really just see them taking a little more ownership and pride in their math than I had in previous years, when it was just kind of, all right, let's just go through the motions. So I've got some, because as always, people love exemplars. So I did ask the students for permission before sharing. Not everyone gave their permissions, but these students did. So you can see a couple of the logos there, the Wheelie Good Bikes, which I just love that name. She kind of went with tessellations a little bit with her bike wheels. The top center one is just a screenshot of some of the portfolios they had to analyze. So when they were looking at their startup costs, they had a fictional investment that they had to, they had an angel investor and they had to gain so much money based on their research. So they had to look at different portfolio options on how they'd invest their money. Kai on the bottom left there, looking at some of her slide work on pricing out places in Hawaii for an acupuncture business. Cynthia's in the middle. She took horseshoes, so she was doing horseback riding in the Italian Dolomites and really wanted to encapsulate the horseshoes, but also the sun, and kind of looked at it that way. And then one of my favorites was this, the top right one, which was the student who looked at the Vietnam connection. And she said, and I didn't want to get it wrong, that the red and yellow were the colors of the Vietnam flag. The circular shapes made her think of bicycle wheels, which related to her tutor, but could also be a conical hat when viewed from above. Yellow is the main color that appears in the logo because it is the color of the old houses and buildings in Hoi An. The curvy wave represents Hoi An's famous river that my tour will bike around. So this is a student who began in pre-calc 12 and made the shift into foundations 12 and really kind of blossomed, having that ability to kind of express things in a different way. This is kind of some examples of the second term. So those were the types of counting questions the students had to write and produce a solution for. They also had to reflect on how their questions connected to their specific business. And then the Hikeopoly was got to be my favorite board game. These were all students, I think there's 3 of them that selected hiking, and they had different colors for their different areas. So one was in Whistler, one was the Wandafuka Trail, and one was Quadra Island. And they had a lot of fun co-developing this game and then working out the probabilities. And one of the probabilities, I think it's from a different group though, is on the bottom left-hand side of the screen there.
We have about 2 minutes left.
All right, thank you. I'm almost done. So I was really, really impressed with where the students took this, and so much so, like one student who's from Alberta decided to do horseback riding in Wyoming, and as she was looking at it, really fell in love with the area, ended up applying for UWyoming and was accepted, and we'll be going there in the fall. So it really allowed the students to see things in a different way. As this was the first year, I'm the only person who teaches this course at my school. It was a lot of work, so I'm still have some refining and adjustments to do based on how things went this year. And then also trying to incorporate and make contacts and connections with local Indigenous tourism, and potentially have some people come to the school and work with the students and talk to the students about their experience. And then, yeah, this term, I'll just talk about this term until you cut me off, Joanna.
Another minute.
Okay. This term, what I've been doing is looking at the Blue Camas and looking at providing students with another story of colonization from an Indigenous perspective and looking at the impact on the Blue Camas. And as they're doing their regressions, they're looking at regressions around camas, so comparing population rates of camas compared to invasive species like Scotch broom, looking at the decline of the Garry Oak ecosystem habitat where camas thrive, bulb size and all that, so based on sunlight. So that's kind of what I'm in the throes of now, trying to sort out. But yeah, that's my family plan in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Wow, that's a lot of work, and I can see that, you know, movement towards Indigenous ecotourism and thinking about, of course, the environment and changes to the environment based on climate emergency changes that are happening, and those definitely affect Indigenous peoples and all of us. So thank you. Questions for Allison? Comments?
I just want to say thank you on behalf of, I've got lots of nieces and nephews and I used to teach high school math, and sort of soul sucking to watch what often the math courses, still are. So thank you for the work you're doing. I would have loved this, and I can say that they would have too. And thanks for sharing it, so you can inspire all of us to, get more creative and make math more meaningful for those high school kids, because I think sometimes that's where it really falls off a cliff in terms of some of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I was just in your session too, and I was like, we are both in for Victoria. I should connect with you.
We should. Let's do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I've really enjoyed problem solving this stuff and kind of creating a lot of this curriculum, but also recognizing as a person of settler ancestry, like it takes time to make the meaningful connections and relationships within community, and particularly at a boarding school that has a similar name as a residential school up island. It can be tricky for community members to want to engage with our school. So I'm doing what I can.
Yes, and it is a journey, definitely. Yeah, and I'm glad you're continuing. It's just really important, especially with Math 12. Getting that kind of engagement is quite marvelous, what you've shared with us, Allison. There's one question from, I think, Shailene. Yeah, you can read it.
Okay. How did the project correlate to traditional tests afterwards, or is it not a requirement for these students? So I did still have them do, just because this was a guinea pig year, it was more quiz style paper tests like what we'd kind of traditionally have, but more smaller scale, just to see what they were able to do without training wheels kind of thing. But in terms of, I actually use their projects as a more indicative of their understanding, because I think in real life, we're not in a position where we're stuck in a pen and paper situation, but we're able to have conversations with other people more collaboratively. Isabella, I think your mic is on. So I was actually able to see them apply the math, which for me, I'm more thrilled about that than just being able to answer these abstract questions that didn't necessarily have the same kind of connections for them. So yeah, I don't know if that, hopefully that answered your, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Would these students be expected to complete more traditional steps at university? Might depend on their university. Most of the students that I get in my Foundations of Math class are probably not going to be taking a lot of math in university. A lot of them are very happy to say it's their last math course they'll be taking. But yeah, it would really depend on their program requirements when they go beyond the high school.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Well, if it is their last class, it's a good one. A good way to say farewell to math in school. So let's go to Rob Cowie, who is a District Indigenous Resource Teacher in School District 43, Coquitlam. Rob will share with us the work that he has done with Gavin Hanna of the same school district and the Coquitlam First Nation and Microsoft in developing a Minecraft world called Pacific Northwest Coast Experience. So take it away, Rob.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I come from the traditional territory of the Coquitlam, and it's a gray, wet day here on the West Coast, but everything's sunny and bright. The world that I'm about to show you was created out of a teacher from our district who came to me, who is heavy into Minecraft, and said how it is such a wonderful tool for students and their learning. And the thought was to create our local legends through Minecraft. And from that inspiration, we said, well, why do we stop right there? Let's create a whole village site. And the inspiration for that village site was actually up at Higinbotham in Mission area, because when I was a classroom teacher, I would take my students to the site and we would learn so much regarding the culture on the Stalo people on the river. And it's very difficult to get to that site these days. And I thought, well, why don't we recreate a village very similar, but here on the West Coast, starting with a coastal village. And of course, we consulted with the Cowie Nation immediately so that we connected with their cultural liaison. And we had weekly meetings regarding what culture protocols should we have within the world. Where we went from there was then we talked to Microsoft, who owns the rights to Minecraft, and we ended up creating a joint project with our Indigenous education as well as our STEAM. Gavin, Hannah, and myself, we worked weekly with the nation and with Microsoft to build this world. And it basically happens pre-contact, but you come in as a visitor. And your goal is, when you come into this village, is to basically do the opposite of what Minecraft asked you to do. In typical Minecraft, they want you to mine everything and keep it into your inventory and keep all the natural resources as you can. But in a sustainable world, if a village did that, their environment would not support them anymore. So we flipped it around and said, only take what you need to help the community to gather sustainably for wintertime. And we've married the two. It was very important for us to have the First Peoples principles of learning with our STEAM, science, technology, math and art and mathematics, and create a holistic approach. And so what I'm going to be showing you is basically a 5-minute video of snippets. First video will be part of the introduction to the world and some of the highlights of the world themselves. The second video will be of students who finished going through the world and then expressing and showing what they learned. And then finally, the third part of the video will be an actual sort of mathematical focus on creating the largest cedar tree that is known here in British Columbia. Our goal was, of course, to have protocols that were generic enough so that coastal peoples up and down the coast can sort of envision their village site here and then add in their own local knowledge. We were not saying, oh, this is strictly Coquitlam knowledge. We invite other coastal nations to participate in the world and say, well, this is how we call this, or this is how we do it in our protocols. So we're not saying this is the end all be all. What's great and what's fantastic about the students' assessment piece is what we call a sandbox world. And it is a blank slate where the students can take their learning from the virtual world and create their own virtual village, showing their learning. And our goal from there is then the teachers to take the students outside of the virtual world to the real world and make those connections. And you'll see some of that in the students' assessment. So I'm going to share my screen. And first, we'll introduce the world. Make sure I share sound. Share. Great. We'll go full screen. Yeah. So this is the introduction to the world in a really quick snippet.
Embark on a journey back in time to the Pacific Northwest coast, where you'll discover a village that has thrived for generations. Meet the people who have been stewards of their land since time immemorial and take in the wisdom of their knowledge keepers and elders. As you immerse yourself in their rich culture, you'll help the village prepare for the upcoming winter by performing 3 unique harvest tasks: stripping bark and splitting planks, gill netting salmon, and gathering berries and camas. But that's just the beginning. You'll also have the opportunity to build your own self-sustaining village further up the coast, inspired by the traditional practices of these coastal people. Join us in this quest to learn how these coastal peoples live in harmony with the land and recognize the interconnectedness of all living and non-living things. Visit a Pacific Northwest Coast Experience webpage to download your world and get started. The adventure awaits.
So that was an introduction to the world itself. And as you can see, there are 3 main harvest tasks: cedar, salmon, and plants. And that's what we started with. And so here you're going to see grade 4 or 5 students from Riverview Park showing you what they've learned and how they've made outside connections into their world.
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Cowie First Nation and lies within the shared traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Musqueam, Squamish, and Stolo nations, all my relations.
So this is the house post, and not down too far from where your school is, Riverview, is another one of these. That's the brother to this is the female figure. That's the brother to this pole. The same log in the same part of the park.
This is a 600-year-old cedar that fell at the Coquitlam watershed.
This is the Coquitlam Redfish Healing Center welcome figure. It stands just outside of the building. Here you can see some of the people in my class, including myself, try to recreate the welcome figure in Minecraft. Here is a better angle of the welcome figure. Here you can also see more details, including the red salmon the welcome figure is holding and the feather hat the welcome figure is wearing.
This is my group's Coast Salish project. What you are looking at right now is the welcoming figure with the sockeye salmon in the hands of the welcoming figure. Last but not least, the hardest part of our build, the Chihuahua giant. It was a pretty big challenge, but my group, we worked together and we made it work.
This is our welcome figure. This welcome figure was inspired by the welcome figure at Riverview Redfish Healing Center.
Right here is our big house. This is the interior of our big house. In the far corner, there is our weaving center. And right here is the salmon center.
This is our smokehouse. It is a great place to smoke and preserve the salmon.
This flag represents the Coquitlam First Nations. Our school was gifted this flag and we are thankful to have this gift. This is why we built this flag.
This is the Chihuahua giant. It is bigger than the others because it is really old. This is the chemist farm. We have a water source so the crops stay fresh.
So that was students' assessment from their learning. And as you can see, they've incorporated some of their learning from the chemist fields that they had to harvest in the virtual world, and also to the weaving centers. And so they created their own big house there in that, and they weren't asked to, but that was part of what they wanted to do. And adding into the flag that was gifted, as well as the welcome figure that their school went down to see. So this is the mathematical part is woven within the whole world, as well as story, as well as culture and social studies and science. Here's an example of one of the math builds of trying to build the Chihuahua giant.
Okay, so we know that this is 55 meters, and we know in Minecraft, one block is?
1 meter.
Yeah, 1 cubic meter, a meter by a meter by a meter. And so this is representing the Chihuahua giant here. And we know that a tree is not a triangle, but I've drawn a triangle to show that it starts out widest at the base, and then at the peak here, it comes to a narrow point. So we know that Minecraft is pretty blocky.
Yeah.
But trees aren't really squares, are they?
No.
So in the village, it's a 1 by 1 and a 2 by 2, and we can make it look a little bit more like a tree.
Yes.
So what is the height is 55, what is the diameter of this tree? That's the measure across.
6.
It's 6, okay. All right, so how do you guys think we could make a more circular base? Do you guys want to give it a try? See if you can make one that is 6 blocks or 6 of those squares, 6 meters across, but it looks a little bit more like a circle.
Okay, stop sharing. Great. So there you can see as we started into building the Chihuahua Giant using those open-ended questions, and you saw in the students' assessment they had it built. That is where we're finding a lot of success where students, it's funny because teachers always ask us and say, I don't do video games. And we say to them, you don't have to. The students know how to play. All you have to do is give them some guidance and say, go ahead, try this, and then tell me what you've learned. And if you're stuck and a student asks you a question that you have no idea, I'll use who in the class knows how to, and they'll say, oh, we do. And then they'll show that the amazing work that students work together. It's freeing for you as a teacher. All you do is become facilitator. And so we invite you to explore the world. You need to have Microsoft education. Typically, most school districts will have a license through Microsoft 365. And then all it is to download the app onto district computers. And all you have to do is sign in with your district email and password. And voila, it's within the Microsoft Education site. And again, you can go, if you don't have it, you can go through a free, I think it's a 7-day free week trial, and you can explore it and then tell your principals to say, hey, we need this, please bring it in. We have classes from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, working with the world for different things. Science in grade 12, ecology science, who've been working with the world because of sustainability and sustainability practices. You're learning about local culture wherever you are in the world. The greatest thing is what's next. And Gavin and I were really quite sneaky, and we were tasked for 3 assignments. So the cedar, the salmon, and the plants. But we wanted to add other elements. And so when you go into the world, it's basically choose your own adventure. Go which way do you want to go? We have the 3 harvest tasks, but we have other sneaky sort of little learning journeys within it. And we've just talked to Microsoft again, and we have some more funding. And so the good news is we're actually going to be able to expand the game. So we're actually inviting our interior Salish people. We're going to be doing trading ulican oil for jade so that the house builder can build his house. And so when you're in the sandbox world, you'll be able to build a big house. And we're going to have some math around that of students having to consider what needs to be within their building. We're also going to be expanding the clam garden so that students can then harvest clams, and how you're looking at ratios on that of how many clams per square meter. As you know, in Minecraft is every block is a square meter. So there's many more things coming, and for all those conspiracy theorists who do believe, we will have a Sasquatch running through the forest if you can catch him. So we're very excited about that. So hopefully that'll be coming in the new year, school new year, so October. So look for that. But end of presentation. So thanks for having me today. We're super excited.
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Rob. This is very exciting. I'm thinking of your next step, expanding, well, the Longhouse and expanding the engagement of students into other learning areas, but building math along with that. And so have we any questions, comments to Rob? Rob, did you start, when you first started, could you share how you started working with teachers and connecting the math part to Minecraft and the local First Nations?
Sure. Regarding the math aspect, it's because we work closely with our STEAM, what they call a STEAM team. We wanted to create a holistic approach. So it wasn't just strictly social studies and culture. We wanted to have other elements in there. And when you go into the world, you'll notice that the camas field is not square. It actually is more of a kidney shape. And so part of the harvest task is you harvest a plant, typically there's an average between 2 camas bulbs to 5 camas bulbs. And so there's ratios within that, but we only ask you to harvest half the field. So then comes the math when, well, you have a kidney-shaped field, what's half? And then the other part is you then have to plant one as you leave. You always have to plant one behind. So we're actually helping with the sustainable practices. Also too, when you're stripping cedar bark, we talk about the protocols of taking only one side of the tree and giving thanks to the tree. And with planks, talking about how planks could be taken from the larger trees and still the tree would live. And from there, we ask the students to work in groups of 4. It seems 3 to 4 seems to be the perfect number. And when they work together, they have to they create enough planks to come back to the big house so that they can build a bentwood box. And so they have to figure out, okay, well, how many planks do we need? Because there's always a recipe in Minecraft world. And they have to figure out, okay, how many planks do we need in order to create this box? So they're given those sort of tasks. Also, too, they'll be harvesting salmon berries. And again, the salmon berries are spread without, and so they're not as compacted as the camas. And so then we're asked this again is how harvest only half of the salmon berry field, because we need to leave food for the other animals and the other beings that live there as well. So there's all this negotiation within their group is, okay, well, how do we, what's half, and how are we gonna map that out? When we go into the sandbox world and they're asked to build a Chihuahua giant, you can see the calculations that we're beginning of how do I create a circle shape with square boxes? And so the students really explore that and say, well, how high up do I go until it narrows? And then again, how high up do I go till it narrows to 1? And so then comes your volume and how many blocks did it take to create that whole tree? What's your diameter to this point and diameter to this point? So there's a lot of those innate questions that come about that students they approach with eagerness, which is really great. They don't get stuck. They persevere through, which is really wonderful because for them it's a game. And so it's sort of covert learning, but yet we as facilitators make it overt and say, well, let's break it apart. Where's the math within this? And now with our new building, the big house, we are going to be asking that volume question. What kind of centers do you need? A cooking center, a weaving center, all those kinds of things. And so you have to have the sleeping quarters. So I see a canoe building. We're limited within the Minecraft world for certain things. So canoe building, what we have is there is a canoe builder down by the beach who's building a canoe. And we do have what we call learn more buttons. And so the NPC or the non-player characters, the elders and the knowledge keepers that you'll see in the world, they have a little button that's called learn more. And so there we're linking to how to build a canoe. There wasn't a fish weir, there was a gill net. So we didn't have a weir, we had a net. So because we wanted the fish to slow down so that you could catch them. Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out for Wilma. I think there's a couple of questions. We'll just briefly maybe discuss them before we need to conclude our session. But with this one, you worked with Coquitlam First Nation. So Barb was asking about other nations, but this is focused solely on Coquitlam.
It's basically kind of focused, like I said, our protocols were generic enough we wanted to be able to use this world up and down the coast all the way down to Northern California. So the coastal peoples, period. And that's we wanted to have it general because we wanted to have that start off point and saying the different nations would say, have that compare and contrast. Do we do it this way or do we do it differently? It starts that conversation. So no, these are not strictly just Coquitlam. We tried to, because Coquitlam is connected to Musqueam as well, we tried to use local protocols, but in a generic way. So other nations have participated in our professional developments, and we've had some great feedback in saying, yes, this is a great way to introduce it, but then we do it slightly different. And we're like, exactly, that's the conversation we want when you're dealing with this world. Is there an endpoint to the world, or do you plan to continue to expand in the next few years? There's an endpoint. It's called finances. So, like I said, we're creating a new landscape, sort of a desert landscape. So the interior, where fishing practices, of course, are different. There be wind-dried salmon and dip netting and pit houses. So we're creating, we're in development right now of where the students will actually have to go hike up into a mountain pass and over the other side. And when we get to the other side, it's a drier climate. And there they'll do a trade of oolic and oil with jade as part of their trade adventure. So we're looking forward to that.
Great. Well, both presentations are so engaging. Allison, thank you for sharing what you've been doing with your foundations of Mathematics 12 and transforming it. So students, I would think, love taking your course and are very engaged in learning lots of math that's for that grade level. And Rob, thank you for showing us how you've taken a Minecraft game in a way and really made it into an important learning experience, bringing together Indigenous culture, the community, and math education, and that you both, are continuing this journey. So we look forward to seeing what's next for both of you and what you're doing. And thank everyone for joining us in this symposium. And we invite you to please give us some feedback. Chao Chu has put in the chat the page that has a short questionnaire about evaluating the symposium. So we would please ask you to do that, and that we will put resources from the presenters, what they give us, we will put them on the K-12 Indigenous Math Ed Network. And we hope to see everyone again for 2025, the Indigenous Math Education Symposium. So thanks, everyone. It was, the time just flew by, and raise my hands and thanks and respect to Allison, to Rob, and for everyone for joining us today. And have a great evening.